Don't we already have enough things wrong with us as women? We don't need to add more to that.
That's today's guest, adult learning expert and researcher, Dr. Julie Ressler, reminding us that the struggle is real. Welcome to Music Ed Insights. I'm leadership trainer and former band director Alan Fire, here with composer and co-college music education program head Steve Shanley.
Each episode, Alan and I talk with national thought leaders in music education with practical insights for K-12 music educators.
Steve, tell us about our guest.
Dr. Julie Ressler is an adult education and corporate training leader based in the Des Moines area. She is currently Associate Vice President of Insurance Operations Training at Athene USA, where she leads a team of performance improvement professionals. Her doctoral research focused on men's experiences with imposter phenomenon and how it can show up through perfectionism, overpreparing, comparison, and the fear of being found out. Find Julie's full bio, show notes, and resources at musicedinsights.com. Alan, what was the takeaway you had from this episode?
I appreciated Julie's reminder that imposter phenomenon isn't a sign that someone lacks ability. In fact, it often shows up in capable, reflective, high-performing people. The very people who care deeply and want to do good work. That feels very relevant to our listeners and to me. What about you, Steve?
I liked how Julie helped us differentiate between a healthy questioning of our abilities versus the pervasive questioning that can lead to imposter syndrome.
Yeah, like the times that I was questioning my own ability to connect with my students, I replaced that with organizational tasks like really fixing up that percussion cabinet. She gives us tools also, how to reframe negative self-talk, the value of keeping an evidence file of successes, and using mistakes and questions for self-improvement. Our insiders get ad-free episodes, and last week, a surprise ticket giveaway to a DCI show. Learn more about our insider program at our website, but for now, let's get to Dr. Julie Ressler.
Julie Ressler, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So you're here today to talk about imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. What is the difference in the wording between those two?
Well, back in 1978, Dr. Pauline Clance, who was a psychologist, she co-created the term imposter phenomena with Dr. Suzanne Imes. However, what they found was when they talked about the imposter phenomena, their research focused on high-achieving women who felt they were frauds, despite clear evidence of competence. So Clance specifically preferred phenomena over syndrome because she did not want to pathologize women or imply something was medically wrong with them. So one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard her say is, "Don't we already have enough things wrong with us as women? We don't need to add more to that." So the idea behind her wording was essentially syndrome sounds like a disorder or defect. Phenomenon describes a common experience or pattern without labeling people as broken.
And so you'll pardon me today if I use those two interchangeably to mean the same thing, but it sounds like lots of people might do this.
They absolutely do. I actually will probably, throughout as we're talking about this topic, I might even use the shortened version, which is IP.
That works. Deal. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your research in this area, please?
Absolutely. As you're reading the research, most of IP research is focused around women, marginalized groups, and people that are in med school. So typically when people are in their third year of med school, they start to get these feelings of, I've been in school for all these years. I don't know if I can really go do this job. I was going to focus on just people in corporate America. And because men aren't typically studied, my advisors, they really encouraged me to select men as my target audience. So that's what I did.
So you're not a public school teacher like most of our listeners, but you're an adult education expert. So how do you see IP? I kind of feel like I'm in the know now. How do you
It's part of the club. Yeah.
how do you see IP showing up in teachers with all ages of students?
Absolutely. Teachers who may have IP may have achieved success in their chosen field. However, sometimes those negative self-views can increase the likelihood that they quit their jobs, They might disengage from work-related goals. Imposter phenomena can show up in teachers in ways that are often hidden behind competence, overpreparing, or perfectionism. A teacher might appear to be highly capable, while inside they might be feeling like they're faking it, or they're afraid that they're going to be exposed, that they're not good enough. So, one important point that researchers make is that IP is not about the lack of ability. It often appears most strongly in high achieving, reflective professionals. So, for example, with music instructors, maybe they're over preparing their lessons and because they feel like, oh, I'm going to be found out if I don't spend all this time over preparing.
Where is the line between sort of a healthy, like this is maybe a bit of a stretch for me or a bit of a challenge, into straight up imposter phenomenon?
I think in education specifically, IP often connects to the unrealistic expectation that teachers should always be confident
Okay.
and always know the answer, and that they have to manage every student perfectly, that they should never make mistakes. We're humans, we're going to make mistakes, and we have to be able to balance that I'm not going to be perfect no matter what I do, and balancing that. But, many effective teachers privately feel that they're not as capable as others perceive them to be. So a lot of times it's just that facade or that game of, wow, am I thinking so much about what others are thinking about me or perceiving the job that I'm doing? I want to make another point here too, because in my research, so many times I heard that childhood experiences, or the people that I was interviewing, they would talk about teachers that had an impact on their lives. So I think it's not only, I think we have to flip the table here a bit and think about the impact that those teachers have on those kids' lives, because as they grow up and they mature, a lot of times I don't think people or teachers specifically understand the influence that they have on those students' lives, because it does help if they can have a positive role model. It does help promote that self-confidence and that self-awareness. And a lot of times that self-talk. I think that's just something we want to think about too, is that not only the teachers themselves, but what are they doing to impact the students so that they don't have these feelings of IP as they grow into adulthood.
There was a conversation recently. There were three teachers in the room, and we all reflected on this phenomenon. We think about the times that we affected kids poorly because we lost our temper or we handled a situation poorly. But what our universal experience has been is that when we see students, they remember the good things about us. But then they also assume that we remember the bad things about us.
I am wondering also if this can creep in because, yeah, we had all of these great experiences with our own teachers, and we think, oh, these teachers made me who I am today and are the reason I am where I am. And oh my goodness, and now I'm teaching. And so I have all this pressure to do the same thing for the students. I hadn't really thought about that before.
I have a list here of, when it could show up with teachers, and it's new teachers, teachers that might be changing grade level. Maybe they taught elementary and they're moving up to high school now, or possibly post-secondary education, teachers in high-performing schools where they feel a lot of pressure, teachers from unrepresented backgrounds, depending on the school and where it's located. And then, human beings, we're really good at looking around and saying, wow, this person continues to grow in their career, or they continue to get those promotions. And then they start to reflect on themselves and think, wow, what am I doing wrong?
So before we get into some of the action items for the listeners, I do just want to take a moment to clarify again that what you're referring to in this discussion are these pretty persistent feelings where this is daily and maybe many times throughout the day, not the occasional, oh, great, Alan got a new job and it's better than mine and more prestigious and makes more money. Huh, okay, well, whatever. Or, all right, well, now I'm going to kind of wing it in front of the group today. I don't really quite know what I'm doing with this piece of music. I should probably be doing a better job. I feel like it's pretty normal to have some of those types of feelings, but what you're talking about is a pretty pervasive. That's what makes it a phenomenon in this instance, correct?
That is correct. And the research shows that up to 70% of people have feelings of IP at some time in their lives. So if people have that feeling, they're definitely not alone. And it can occur really at any time.
All right, so those feelings are starting to creep in. What do we do about it?
Yeah, so awareness is the first step. Acknowledging that when IP thoughts appear, instead of automatically believing them, it's reframing that negative talk. Dr. Carol Dweck has a pretty popular, if you've heard of growth mindset, she's got some really good work and a lot of material out there in the world. And really, she's taken the growth mindset, which is when you can look at things that challenges are exciting rather than threatening. So rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to need to reveal my weaknesses, you can say, wow, here's a chance to grow. So I love all of Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, and it's really versus fixed mindset. So in the growth mindset theory, you're thinking about failure as an opportunity to grow versus failure is the limit of my abilities. This is also part of how the teachers can use this with their kids. I can learn to do anything I want versus I'm either good at something like playing an instrument or singing, or I'm not. My effort and attitude determine my abilities, or that's the growth mindset, or in the fixed mindset, I don't like to be challenged. And then also feedback. Feedback is really important to be open to it, right? Constructive feedback, and then not giving up when frustrated. Another thing that I've done is one of the suggestions is keeping an evidence file of your successes. And I actually have in my Microsoft Outlook, I have a kudos file folder. And anytime I receive some positive feedback or I have accomplishments or I receive a thank you note, I keep that. I keep my personal wins in that section. And if there are times when I'm feeling like, oh, can I actually do this? I'll open that up and I'll read that information. And it's amazing how that can really just boost your feelings about yourself. Stop comparing yourself to others. People often compare their internal struggles to someone else's external success. So focusing on your own personal growth rather than comparison. And I know that one's a lot easier said than done because I
Yeah. Yeah. It would be nice if we would realize that the teachers that we compare ourselves to, usually some of our role models that might be 10 to 20 or 30 years older than us that we admire, also had the same feelings at some point. And how can we access that empathy brain to think, you know what? As good as they are now, they went through this also.
Yeah, absolutely. The research that I did, first of all, it was very surprising. The subjects in my research, a lot of them were what we would term to be successful in terms of title or position. And some of the feedback I was receiving was, I am sitting at this boardroom table and I ask myself every day, how did I get here and why am I sitting here? And if I move into the next role, am I going to be the demise of this entire organization? So it's just very interesting. A lot of times we show up confident and competent, but inside that self-talk is, wow, what am I doing here? How did I get here?
If somebody wanted to complete the Clance Imposter Phenomenon scale, can they find it online?
Absolutely. It is a 20 question assessment, and it's just called the Clance Imposter Scale. It's probably the most widely used. There are other assessments out there, but I found that one to be the most useful.
I'm curious about your take on this because sometimes when maybe someone says, all right, so I got this job, I'm not sure if I'm good enough for it, or I got asked to do this honor band, I'm not sure if I'm good enough for it. One of the exercises I'll sometimes work them through is comparison and kind of to help them realize, well, who else were they going to hire for the job? Well, other people have done that honor band and you've been there and it was not great. Are there instances that you can think of where it might actually be okay to run a comparison exercise to help yourself realize, yes, I'm okay, thank you very much?
I think so. Practicing self-compassion is really important. And if that means that you can step back and say, I have this, I'm good. I've trained for this, I've practiced for this, I've had great role models in these situations, we do want to make sure that we're speaking to ourselves with the same kindness that you would speak to a friend or a colleague. So I don't think it's just that balance, right? We don't want to get into a place where we're constantly comparing ourselves and judging and analyzing
So
and
again, back to that pervasiveness.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Do you have other suggestions for what we can do when we notice these feelings kind of starting to creep in?
Absolutely. So accepting that, growth requires learning. So no one knows everything. Making mistakes and asking questions are part of that personal and professional growth. And I can say, I've learned a lot more from the things that have gone wrong in my career versus when everything went really well. And I've also experienced that with leaders. There have been a lot of times when I can look at a situation and I know immediately that is not behavior that I want to repeat, just seeing that, and that's stuck with me.
What about just talking to other people about how we feel? I have to imagine that might help as well.
It absolutely does. Seeking mentorship and support, talking openly with your trusted peers, mentors, or leaders often will reveal that successful people experience similar feelings.
I also think talking about this with someone who is not a musician or not a music teacher, my wife and I will often joke about the sort of best in show mockumentary aspect of our profession. And then we kind of come to realize that all professions are like that, where when you step away from it, and people are like, "So you all take like high school jazz band contests that seriously?" That's wow. Okay. And it's like that for every profession, really, except for people who
Mhm.
are curing childhood cancer. And sometimes just sort of saying out loud to someone who is not an expert in our field, and you kind of put it all into a perspective, and you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't such a big deal after all.
If other people are trying to develop that kind of relationship or that kind of situation where you can support each other through that, I think one of the more important things to do, maybe this is a whole episode on its own, is to talk a little bit less. Because what Steve described, like I might want to hop in and say, or he might want to do that to me. But what we've learned is you just listen, maybe
Mhm.
ask, and Steve's very good at this, to like ask just one little question to provoke that. So more silence and more little questions rather than like tons of reassurance.
So we have kind of an interesting phenomena in our profession, and that is, in general, the big high school instrumental music jobs tend to be men. And the elementary general music teaching positions tend to be occupied by women. And sort of anecdotally, I notice the imposter syndrome showing up, especially when we break those types of norms, when a woman might get one of those high powered high school instrumental music teaching jobs, for instance. Did you gather any observations on gender differences as you investigated imposter phenomena?
Findings are mixed when you connect gender to IP. So, a lot of the academic literature and media, as I've mentioned, often link IP to women and disadvantaged, unrepresented groups. So, with that 70% number again, it can affect both men and women and at really any time. There was a researcher that investigated the hypothesis that male and female imposters react differently depending on the feedback that they've received or the accountability. And that researcher, Badawai, concluded that male imposters react more negatively to performance cues, namely negative feedback, and perceived accountability than their female counterparts. Now, back in the 80s, when Dr. Clance and Imes, they supported the notion that imposter feelings exist with a higher frequency and intensity for females, and that males and females experience different societal pressures. Badaway's study suggested that men with IP experience greater anxiety after they receive that negative feedback than females. However, females report experiencing IP at a higher degree than males. So it's it is, as I said, findings are mixed. It's confusing. So at the end of the day, females responded to be a little more resilient in those stressful situations, but then, men also exhibited signs of distress and reduced effort that in situations triggered concerns about maintaining positive feelings of their competence. I think it's that they experience it differently. Like females reported feeling IP at a higher degree than males, but men tended to react with more distress and reduce efforts in situations.
So basically what men do, like if a woman gets a cold, she doesn't say a word to anybody. But when I get a cold, it's like, oh, I
Uh-huh.
must sit in my chair and tell everyone about my sore throat. So I've been talking for a while now, getting toward the end. But are there other findings from your own research that are interesting, cool, surprising that our listeners might benefit from that you haven't had a chance to share yet?
Yeah, people who have these feelings suffer from its associated side effects, included and not limited to anxiety, depression, lack of confidence, decreased job satisfaction, and the inability to achieve in the face of self-imposed unattainable goals. And that sadly can lead to burnout, right? And that's pretty pervasive in the world of education, at least from some of my friends that I talk to. And then there's always we need more access to affordable, effective mental health counselors who are specifically trained in IP. It's one of those topics that a lot of times, they're not always trained specifically in IP. So also, I'll refer back to the study that I did demonstrated the importance of addressing childhood influences related to IP emerging as an adult. And that's why I said I think it's really important that band instructors, teachers take seriously the impact that they have on these children's lives as they're helping them shape and form them for their future. They're role models, really.
All right. So, what cool things have you been up to recently? Are you still continuing with this research?
I am. I'm working with Dr. Beverly Westra, and we are working together to put together a program for individuals who feel like they have IP and helping them work through some of those. It's going to be a self-study program, and we are hoping to finalize that here soon. But in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn at Julie Ressler and be happy to share as that continues to be created.
All right. Well, thank you, Julie. Can you stick around for some lightning round questions?
I would love to.
All right. So, you are in Des Moines, Iowa, correct?
I am.
What's your favorite restaurant there these days?
I have two. They're both in downtown Des Moines. I would say Centro and then Fresco is kind of that fresh food farm to table, and they're both amazing. And I feel like when I'm at Centro, I feel like I'm in New York City or maybe Chicago. It's got the atmosphere that's just lovely.
And how about a musical artist, a group, or even maybe just a song that you wish more people knew about?
Well, Alan knows I'm a big Need to Breathe fan. That is all one word, Need to Breathe. They are a rock and roll band out of South Carolina. The first time that I saw them was in downtown Des Moines it was Legends at the time, and it was on the second floor on Court Avenue there. There were about 60 people. You could reach out and touch the band. That's how small they were. And then fast forward, that was in 2009, 2010 timeframe. Fast forward to 2017, and I saw them at Red Rocks in Colorado. So it was quite the experience. They've continued to evolve, but they're known for their blending of Southern rock, Americana, alternative rock, folk, and spiritually reflective songwriting. And I think my favorite song, I'm a little obsessed. I've seen them in concert 13 times, so I am one of their groupies, you might call me. But they're probably one of my favorite songs. It's an old one. It's called Something Beautiful, but they've come out with some new songs here as well, and they're fantastic. My favorite. I'm a bit obsessed.
How about a favorite show or film you've watched recently?
I just finished watching The Madison on Paramount Plus, and I'm anxiously awaiting for season two. So entertaining. It has Michelle Pfeiffer and Kurt Russell and some other great actors. So very good show.
How about the most memorable musical performance or concert you've attended? Guessing it's Need to Breathe?
I have to go with Need to Breathe.
Okay.
However, part two of that, my daughter and I just saw Need to Breathe in Chicago this fall. And we were, in Chicago, there's music everywhere, which is so amazing. So we were having lunch and she pulled up on her phone and she said, Mom, Sarah McLachlan's here tonight. Let's go. So we got to go watch her, and her voice is angelic. It really is. It was amazing. And it was in an old theater, and it was a very special evening. So Need to Breathe on Friday night and Sarah McLachlan on Saturday night. I mean, it was a dream come true.
And finally, a book recommendation for our listeners, please.
Yes, I am almost finished with Theo of Golden by Alan Levy. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It's a story of giving and receiving, of seeing and being seen, and it tells a beautiful story about the power of creative generosity, the importance of wonder to a purposeful life, and the invisible threads of kindness that bind us together. And I think it ties in nicely with IP. If you have those feelings of IP, this is that feel-good book that will really help you regain faith in humankind.
Julie Ressler, it's been great to have you on the show today. You're one of my favorite fellow professionals in this space. And there's reasons for that keep popping up over and over again over the last 15 years. So I'm so glad that we're acquainted and glad that we could cross over and have you visit with our listeners about this important topic. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun to talk about this topic.
Thanks for listening to Music Ed Insights.
We're supported by Group Dynamic, a leading provider of youth leadership workshops. Alan works with dozens of schools each year to help develop their leaders. Learn more at groupdynamicyouth.com.
Or you could email me at alan@groupdynamic.net. You could also learn about Steve's arrangements, compositions, and program consulting at steveshanley.com.
Or email me, steve.shanley@gmail.com.
Our Facebook page is Music Ed Insights.
Our website has program notes, links, and information about our Insider program. That's musicedinsights.com.
Insiders get ad-free episodes and a one-page download of this episode's key takeaways.
Expect episodes most Mondays during the school year.
Get current.
Stay relevant.
Music Ed Insights.